Senator Jon Kyl continues to stall on the START treaty, even as the list of Republican statesmen urging its passage grows. Scowcroft, Kissinger, Powell, Duberstein, Schultz, Howard Baker, James Baker. But our third story is the White House looks to GOP moderates to ratify a treaty that would keep loose nukes out of the hands of terrorists. Senator Susan Collins still needs convincing from a guy who can't pronounce nuclear. The new START, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, would reduce both American and Russian nuclear arsenals, signed by both President Obama and Russian President Medvedev back in April. It has yet to go into effect due to the efforts of Senate Minority Whip Kyl, who has delayed ratification for months. Mr. Kyl placing blame on Majority Leader Reid.
My issue is that you can't do everything. I was stating it as a matter of reality, not a matter of policy. How can Harry Reid do all of the things we've talked about, deal with the expiring tax provisions, and in addition to that, deal with the START treaty, which by itself could probably take at least 2 weeks?
The last START treaty was passed through Congress in 5 days. Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri speaking about what's really going on.
There's some game playing going on with the START treaty, and it's all about politics, and it's all about trying to damage the President of the United States. We've now gone months without any verification of loose nukes. Look at Dick Lugar, who I think, instead of playing politics and hiding behind the skirts of Jon Kyl, I hope that the Republicans look at Richard Lugar, the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, who has said unequivocally, we need to do this START treaty.
To that point, Senator Lugar has asked his Republican colleagues to do your duty and vote for your country and vote for ratification. And that comment and his perceived moderate voting record catch the eye of Tea Party groups. They have vowed to primary Mr. Lugar in 2012. Former Republican Senator Danforth of Missouri telling the New York Times, if Dick Lugar, having served 5 terms in the U.S. Senate, being the most respected person in the Senate and the leading authority on foreign policy, is seriously challenged by anybody in the Republican Party, we have gone so far overboard that we are beyond redemption. Pretty good assessment. That brings us back to Senator Collins. Unconvinced by Lugar's appeal to patriotism, is Collins instead telling the Washington Post that she could be persuaded to vote for the treaty if the former Presidents Bush would tell her what they think of it. It would be wonderful if President George H.W. Bush would come out for the treaty. That would be so powerful and definitely help. Once again, for help on this topic, we turn to former Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Reagan, now Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, Lawrence Korb. And again, our thanks for some of your time tonight, sir.
Nice to be with you again.
It's not just Senator Collins or Senator Lugar about Senator Collins and all these other Republicans kind of blowing back. In the Washington Post, Robert Kagan, not exactly a liberal, wrote that if START is defeated, that will, as he put it simply, strengthen Vladimir Putin. Is he right? And if he's right, why are Republicans willing to risk that?
Yeah, well, Bob is certainly right, and Bob is an expert in Russia. He's lived in Russia, and he understands that in Russia now you have a struggle for the future of the country and its foreign policy between Putin and Medvedev. And if this treaty is turned down, Putin can say, see, I told you can't trust these guys. They're trying to take advantage of us. They're trying to expand NATO. They're trying to encircle us. So there is a real danger. And I tell you, what Obama needs to do is get out there and make sure that people know if we upset our relations with Russia, it's going to hurt those men and women in Afghanistan because they're allowing all of the supplies to go across Russia to that theater.
Is this something that he can deal, President, that is, directly with Mr. Kyl about? Because the administration already made a concession set to Senator Kyl on the nuclear program. Is there something he wants, or how does he justify obstructing something that is obviously something that this country wants and needs, and the Russians agreed to, and if it falls apart, it's going to make us look bad and the Russians look good?
Well, the problem right now is the American people are not focused on it. With the end of the Cold War, they've sort of put this aside. You can't, I mean, basically they bribed Kyl already. They put 20% more into modernizing the nuclear complex than President Bush had done. And even that has not done it. And in that interview with David Gregory, he did not come across with a single substantive argument against it. He basically was talking procedure because he knows any substantive argument will be shot down by the elders of the Republican Party, people like Baker and Kissinger and Schlesinger and Scowcroft. And so he's just delaying, because if it goes to the next Congress, you got to start all over. We need hearings. We got to get it out of committee. And by that time, then he can say, well, then we get into a presidential election, so let's wait some more. And he accomplishes his objective without ever having to, take on the arguments.
But what is his objective? Why does he not want this thing passed?
Well, I think he wants to be the rising star among the neoconservatives or the Tea Party people, whatever you want to call them, to take that away from Lugar. And by doing this, he can get that accolade. The other is they want to defeat Obama. And if this happens, this will be a victory for Obama. They don't want to let him get any victory, so he accomplishes two things. His own star rises, and he undermines Obama.
Senator Collins and her comment about the President's Bush, is there the germ of a good idea in there? Should both former Presidents Bush come out in favor of this and right now?
Well, I think former presidents usually don't get involved in politics. The reason she's doing that, don't forget the Bushes have the home up in Kennebunkport. She knows that because her voting record in most cases is moderate, she could be challenged from the right, so they can provide her political cover, particularly if she can get the second President Bush. But I would urge them, right now, given where this is, maybe to go against what normally happens when presidents stay out of issues after they leave office, because both of them had arms reduction treaties with the Soviets and then the Russians, and they know the problems this is going to cause if it doesn't go through.
Lawrence Korb, former Assistant Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan. Again, great thanks.
Thanks for having me.